I've just turned over £100,000 in less than 4 months, starting my own business from scratch, selling cars just like this. What mistakes did I make? What works, what doesn't work, and can anyone do it? 4 months ago, I left my full-time job after my health completely nosedived. I couldn't afford to go sick. I've got 3 children at home, and one of them was only just born. So I took a huge risk. All of my friends told me this is the best thing for you to do. Go and start your own motor trade business. 2nd of June, I handed in my notice. 3rd of June, I incorporated what would be my new car business. Yeah, as crazy as it sounded at the time, my friends told me to trust them, follow a few key steps, and everything would fall into place. This was a huge risk. The only thing I will say about this, and doing it overall, is that I get a lot more time at home with the wife and kids, quality time, compared to when I had my full-time job. When I had my full-time job, I was doing 4 on, 4 off, 12-hour shifts a day, but the time you spend commuting and all the rest of it, I was barely seeing them. And the 4 days off, I was trying to catch up from the 4 days where I was on. I reckon I'm getting 80 to 90% more quality time with the wife and kids compared to what I did before, which is a massive, massive difference, of course, especially if you're family orientated. Thankfully, because I've been around cars and the business of cars for over a decade, it was very familiar and I knew what to look for. Step 1, before anything else, go and get your own motor trade policy. This was the key. I was lucky I found a policy that was only a few £100s a year more than my personal private car insurance, which meant switching to that wasn't a huge sacrifice, and it came with social, domestic and pleasure coverage for my personal cars as well as my cars in stock. So that was a no-brainer. I was able to cancel my personal policy and start a new motor trade policy without much sacrifice. This was an important step, as most of the doors for motor traders are opened simply by providing a motor trade insurance certificate. Problem number 2 was capital. Once the insurance is sorted, we need capital to buy some stock. At that point, I reached out for guidance and they said, well, what cars do you currently have? I told them I got 2 cars. One of my cars was a 2006 Audi A6. It was a 3-litre TDI Quattro V6, stage 1 remapped with a BMK engine. That meant there was no DPF or anything to worry about, and because of that, it was currently on 219,000 miles, but it was running really well. No leaks, drove beautifully, and it was quite quick. The biggest issue with it though is I had no MOT, and because of a few little points around the sills, we knew it needed quite a bit of work to get it past the MOT. It's a shame because mechanically speaking, this Audi A6 was really nice to drive. Quick, good engine, did everything well. But officially speaking, in the retail's eyes, it's a bucket, which meant it's not worth much at all. I wasted no time. The Audi was gone that night for £600, which considering it had no MOT, I was pretty happy with. As for the Insignia, it didn't take that long. That went not long later for around 2,200 quid. In the middle of those first 2 steps, I'd already begun forming partnerships. One of the partnerships to form was with a warranty supplier. Thankfully, I already had a relationship with one company. Warranty can pretty much be viewed like insurance, in the fear that they'll either mess people around or not pay out. That's why I was very careful to choose who I partnered with long term and allowed my cars to go out with their policies attached to them. After a few days of setting things up, I had officially set up my partnership with Warranty First, and the Insignia was the first car that had the warranty applied to it. Of course, this adds a little bit of extra profit per sale, but it can also genuinely be a lifesaver both for you and the customer, God forbid something goes wrong with the car in the near future. Warranty First does allow repairs to happen at any garage of the customer's choosing, unlimited mileage limit, even transferable cover if they decide to sell the car, but the key detail is the process to pay out is fast. Once I had about 2.5 grand in the bank, I made a few accounts and decided to take a big risk and go and buy something from BCA. The good news is I won the bid for this 2018 Vauxhall Zafira. This was the last year that they were made, and it was actually quite a nice example as well. However, my inexperience clearly showed at this point because there were 2 major fails that I did with this one purchase early on. The first one was it turned out to be an X-Taxi. Now, yes, it was declared and I knew it was an X-Taxi when I bought it, but I didn't realise that it halved the value of the car in retail just being an X-Taxi alone, regardless of if it was used for 5 minutes or 5 years as a taxi. And the second issue was with the BCA fees. Surprisingly, I've seen a lot of videos on BCA. Very rarely do I see people talk about the fees that are associated with them. To put it plain, it was over £500 in fees. That is a totally separate charge to what I paid for this car. Thankfully, I had the car checked over, it was a clean example, passed MOT with no advisories, and boom, it sold quick. And because it was a modern car, it meant a huge amount of coverage on the vehicle, including stuff like the turbocharger, so it was definitely worth selling it with a warranty. At this point, I started to form a bit of a routine. All the cars I pulled in would be very carefully selected going forward. The majority I started buying were actually from private. The next one I pulled in was this 2009 BMW 320i M Sport. This one was actually quite special, and I really liked this car because I went to go and pick it up. It was really well looked after, didn't even have any swirl marks on it. It was really nice. However, it did have one little fault, and that fault was something that was actually quite a surprise to fix. The fault was simple. You can be on the motorway on cruise control and you'd feel the power getting turned on and off intermittently, kind of like a light switch. But if you turn the traction control off, the problem disappeared. So I took the risk, picked up the car, and to my surprise, the traction control module gets its power from about 5 different places. However, fuses for 3 of the places were missing. We simply added the 3 fuses back and it fixed it. That one sold within 36 hours. The next one was a sourcing job for a customer, and this is where I had my first experience of a nightmare customer who was very happy with everything. He loved the car that I pulled for him. It ticked every box that he asked for. However, this guy's wife loved the car in the beginning, and after a month, she decided she didn't like the look of it anymore and wants to return it. Obviously, the answer was no. That is not a reason to return a car. The car was working perfectly fine, and he started taking to quite bad measures. Either way, he was dealt with. We then moved on to a Mercedes B-Class, which, to be honest with you, is not my sort of thing, but it was a cheap and cheerful automatic for someone, so that didn't hang around too long either. But then things amped up. I bought myself this 2011 Mercedes C250 CDI Sport Edition 125. 125 being the anniversary edition. It was low mileage, exceptional condition inside and out, had a load of extras, parking sensors, adaptive bi-xenons, auto beam, etc. I'll be honest, this one was such a pleasure to work on. I didn't even see this as work. I really enjoyed every part of being with this car. At this point, the process was becoming very simple. Be very selective with the car that I pull in. Obviously, all the cars were HPI checked. I used Car Vertical to check the backgrounds, make sure there was no finance, etc. on the cars. Obviously, one of my rules is no category cars, write-offs, anything like that. This one, though, was clearly gorgeous, so well looked after. I'll be honest, it was sexy. And I'm quite thrilled because one of my friends bought the car. Yeah, it was around this time that I went from having 1 car at a time to 2, which was obviously significant growth very early on. And next I got this 2009 BMW 320d, very similar to the petrol one I sold, but this one was not an M Sport, but it was, however, a very nice example, but it took longer to sell. And it turned out the reason was actually really simple. I started covering the number plate. Now, at the time we thought that this was a professional thing to do, but it was too early for me to be doing this. Think about it, you're going to go and spend a couple of grand on a car, and when you look at the photos, you can't even do your own background checks. One of my friends called me up and pointed this out to me, and as soon as he told me that, I put the registration in the description, and within an hour someone phoned and secured the car. That was enough proof for me, and going forward, I didn't do that again. At that point, I simultaneously pulled in a Audi A1 and a VW Golf, both of which were actually really nice cars, really good runners. They needed a good clean, they needed a good service, and then from that point going forward, they actually sold pretty well. The routine with the cars was pretty simple. Once they came in, I had to identify a list of what the car needed, anything to tart it up a little bit, even things as simple as number plates. If they're cracked, if they're rusted, get them off, put a fresh set on there. It's a lot easier on the eyes. But I noticed most of the cars I was buying were private, not through auctions. Yeah, this turned out to be a good and a bad thing going forward. The Golf was interesting because cosmetically it wasn't great. It had imperfections all over it. And it wasn't severe. I mean, to most people, it was still really nice. But to someone like me, I look at the, little paint strips and scratches and stuff all over it that are quite predominant. But I put it up for a discounted price anyways to see if anyone wanted it before I sent it into the body shop. And sure enough, people were not bothered about the cosmetics and were happy to pay the lower price. I've always avoided adding Fords to my own personal collection, but they do sell really well. People love them, people trust them because it's a lot of car for very little money. If you can't beat them, join them. I pulled in this low mileage, gorgeous example, and it went very fast. From that point on, I then thought, you know what, let me try a few more Fords. So I got hold of a B-Max, and sure enough, this one went pretty quickly as well. Then I got hold of another Ford Focus that was quite similar. Only difference with this one is it wasn't the EcoBoost engine, it was the 1.6 petrol, which a lot of people prefer, even though it's not as quick, but it's a lot more reliable long term. Things then stepped up a bit and I got myself an Audi Q5, which reminded me of my old Q7 to be honest. However, this Q5 did have an issue. It would come up on the dashboard with a gearbox malfunction. Thankfully, I've got my own diagnostic machine and I plugged it in and it came up saying that there was a gear selector that was playing up. Thankfully, the gear selectors on these are not the biggest job to do. What it meant was I had to buy another gear selector and I had to remove one piece. It was like a motherboard. I had to pull off of one and stick it on the other, but to get to it was not easy. I wouldn't consider myself much of a DIY guy, but I took the challenge. I stripped out a lot of the interior, managed to get right into the gear selector of the original one, transplant it with the new one, put it all back together, cleared the codes, and amazingly, it fixed the problem, never came back. I was actually quite happy with that one. That one was a really, really satisfying fix, and it came up really, really well. A family with young children came and bought that one, and they loved it. They absolutely loved it. They were so happy when they drove it away. This Mercedes here was the one that really, really upset me. And you know, it upset me because it was such a nice car. Out of all the stuff I had, that one would probably outlast everything, truth be told. And yet it was the hardest to sell, despite the fact that it was stupidly cheap. Let me explain. This car came with a full Mercedes-Benz dealership service history, with the last service only being done 150 miles ago. I even called Mercedes to confirm this, and yeah, they said to us, we've looked after this car, it doesn't need a thing. And yeah, I can clarify, it didn't need a thing. It was cosmetically and mechanically immaculate. But it was a manual. I had a lot of people calling and they all forgot or didn't realise it was a manual, at which point to them it was useless. But a low mileage example like this, with no advisories on the MOT, the 2.1 diesel engine that was, bomb-proof when it came to reliability, and it had the most comprehensive history that you can pretty much get on one of these, and retail, it was only £3,000. The amount of car you get there and peace of mind for £3,000, it's unrivaled, but it took ages to sell, which is baffling, obviously, when you think about it. So after that trauma, I went back to a Ford Focus, but this time I stepped it up a bit and I got a 2017 titanium model. Now this one has the infamous EcoBoost engine, but I've made sure that I got with it a full receipt of not only servicing, but also the wet belt, the gaskets, the water pump, oil pump. Everything was done on this one in the last few months. It was also MOT'd with no advisories, had a fairly low mileage, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, all of that stuff was there, and I was including a strong warranty with it. Yeah, that last invoice that came with it was $1.5 grand for all that rebuild work. After a couple of days, someone from over 200 miles away called and said, I want that car delivered tomorrow. And sure enough, we delivered it to them, and I got myself an Enterprise car to come back. Interestingly, in terms of logistics, I don't use trade plate drivers. The reason for that is I used to own a trade plate company, and in my experience, trade plate drivers will, for the most part, abuse cars. Not all of them will do it. I certainly didn't do it when I was trade plating, but a lot of them I've seen when collecting cars will just wheel spin it, not let it warm up, all sorts of issues. And at the end of the day, that's my stock. So I drove it and I delivered it personally myself. In terms of me getting back, I found the best way was to get a corporate account with Enterprise and simply rent a one-way car to come back. On this occasion, incredibly, the cheapest car was a brand new E-Class. Getting towards the top now, I then got myself a Euro 6 ULEZ compliant 520D M Sport. This one had the Harman Kardon Logic 7 surround system with Pro navigation. It was a gorgeous colour. It was like a black but with a tinge of pearl blue. It was really, really nice. Now this one had the uprated version of the N47 infamous engine, which they say has all the reliability issues. But this one at this period was uprated, so it wasn't as bad. This one ran really, really well, to be fair. It was actually the first time I was genuinely considering keeping the car myself since that white Mercedes, because it drove so well. That Enterprise new E-Class I drove back, that honestly in comparison, there wasn't much difference. Apart from the modern looks and flashiness of the new Mercedes, this one honestly was not much different. I'd be happy to drive that every single day. Sadly for me, I put it on the market and it sold within a day. I had 3 possible buyers in the first day. One failed finance, the other one was tire kicking, the third one wanted it delivered that night, and he paid full money on the spot. Very sadly, he had one of these cars before for a month. It got written off, not his fault, someone went into him. He'd only just got out of hospital and he really wanted his BMW back. So he bought it and he loves it. Incredibly, the first buyer who couldn't get the finance got back in touch with me, said he finally managed to get the money, but it was too late, the car had sold. So he asked me to go and source him another one that was slightly more modern and in white. So I did. This one actually had the newer engine, the B47 engine, as opposed to the N47 engine. It was only £35 a year to tax. So it's better in reliability. It apparently was a big leap forward in reliability compared to the N47. Sadly, he got into a big accident a few days before he was to collect it, and so we had to pull out the deal. Either way, it ended up selling not long later. Couldn't go much further without a Jaguar. My first Jaguar that I've ever bought. This one was owned by a solicitor for the last 9 years, who only had Jaguars for about 30 years, been looked after by a specialist, and was a low mileage example. The interior was absolutely gorgeous. The interior looked like nobody had ever sat in the back seats before. Cream is not everyone's cup of tea, but personally, I thought it was really nice. After that, I did my first CarWow purchase and got hold of a late 2013 Mini Countryman Cooper S. And this was the all-4 model, which is their all-wheel drive. This one had quite a good spec on it. It was a heated leather interior, panoramic roof, even had the ambient lighting. That car sold very, very fast. And I'm not surprised. After all this excitement, I went back to Ford and got hold of a Kuga. I got this Kuga thinking I got a great deal. Auto Trader valued the car retail at £3,900, which for a 2011 Kuga was very, very optimistic. After getting myself a subscription to see the true valuation of cars on the spot going forward, I then learned the true retail value of this car was £2,800. That's an £1,100 difference between the true valuation retail and what Auto Trader was suggesting was the retail. That was not a small difference, and using that tool, I learned very, very quickly that most of my private purchases, I was overpaying for them. Whilst that will adjust my offers to private sellers going forward, then I got myself a Range Rover. This Range Rover came up and it was too good to say no to. Needed a bit of TLC and love, but clearly that was something I could provide. The service history was strong, the engine was good, the spec and the interior was really nice, and I couldn't help myself. I bought it. Very, very sadly, while I was driving the car home, it went into limp mode on the motorway. I drove 200 miles in limp mode getting this car back home. Thankfully, it turned out to just be a split boost pipe. 40 quid later, got a new boost pipe, slapped it in, and all the car's power was back. It drove really, really well. We then gave it a buff, tried to get rid of the surface scratches and swirl marks, and unsurprisingly, the phone rang consistently for this car. Sadly, within a week, I got a phone call from the customer saying that the engine light was on. Customer didn't live too far away from me, so on a Friday evening, I offered to go around to pick up the car and see if I can resolve it over the weekend for her, so it would be ready for her work on Monday. She was really happy with this, and I went over, picked up the car. Thankfully, it turned out to be quite an easy fix. Just needed a flush so the fuel can get through properly, new filters in it for peace of mind, and it's back to the customer. Customer's been very happy since. After the Range Rover, I'd sold 22 cars, crossed over £100,000 turnover in less than 4 months, and that meant I now had to register for VAT since I've crossed that £90,000 threshold. The stock has now grown from 2 cars to 3, and if you made it this far, well done. Going forward, documenting each vehicle as they come in will get a lot more interesting. Engine and gearbox need to come out on this. I hope my story's meant something to you. If it has, stick around, subscribe, and you'll see a lot more coming.